Well, thank you all for joining us for this special webinar. Keely and I have had a couple of conversations over the last 12 months just with regard to how important it is that as women in senior leadership roles in projects that we make a contribution. And we've been talking about how to make that contribution for a little while, and we thought, let's do something really positive and shine a light on project professionals, and in particular women in leadership, women in project leadership that we feel are kind of blazing the trail, which led to a conversation with Sarah, who absolutely exemplifies that leadership that we'd like to showcase. And Keely and Sarah are going to have a conversation today really about Sarah's journey into those leadership roles. So before we get into that, I will introduce our two panelists. First of all, Keely. Keily Jordan-Jefferies is the acting manager for Unity Water's EPMO, where she manages the EPMO team, the enterprise business transformation portfolio. She oversees the organization's delivery framework, including training and tool sets. She also plays a valuable role providing strategic guidance to the organization's leadership team, as well as providing that specialist guidance and support for high complexity projects and programs. Keely's got a really strong leadership background and experience managing transformation programs, and she infuses her role with multidisciplinary perspective cultivated through years of direct and technology governance. Her passion for leadership and transformation enriches her proficiency in providing strategic advice, and her extensive experience providing portfolio management, coupled with her technical leadership, uniquely positions her to offer invaluable guidance during enterprise strategic planning and delivery cycles. Welcome, Keely, and thank you for taking me on and joining us for this webinar series.
So pleased to be here. Thanks, Louise.
Pardon?
It's so pleased to be here.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Sarah Foxe is a dynamic leader with a career spanning corporate, not-for-profits and government sectors. She began her early career in microfinance and international development, working across programs that spanned 18 countries to drive social and economic change, including time spent living and working in the Philippines. These days, Sarah is the director of the EPMO at the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority, which is formerly Resilience New South Wales. And Sarah is super passionate about strategy, human-centered design, and equipping project teams with the tools and support they need for effective decision-making. Sarah's led governance redesigns that empower organizations to make faster decisions, streamline processes, and accelerate delivery. As certified project director, Sarah has an MBA from the Australian School of Management, where she graduated in 2020. All right, so without further ado, I will stop sharing my screen and I will hand over to Keely and Sarah. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much, Louise. Thank you, everyone, for joining Sarah and I on today's conversation about project leadership, or female project leadership in our project management world. I just wanted to reframe the conversation really quickly around what today we're going to be going through today from an overview perspective and why this conversation matters. So since it's International Women's Day, it is the perfect time to celebrate women who paved the way. So those people I like to call pathfinders. The pathfinders set the direction and they create the path for all of us, not only today, but also the next generation to come. So in today's conversation, we're going to be talking about some real stories, some real wins, and some strategies that have helped women stand out and lead and lift others along the way. So whether or not you're just starting out in your project leadership journey or stepping into a leadership role or looking for other ways to create an impact, there will be things that you can take away from today's call, reflecting on Sarah's amazing story. And hopefully that will help you lead your own path and we can celebrate Sarah as a pathfinder. So let's get into it, Sarah. Let's start with your journey. If you had to summarize your leadership path in 3 words, what would they be?
I just want to say thank you. It's a real honour to be here. International Women's Day is such a great time to celebrate and reflect. And I guess I really hope by having this conversation today, I can encourage someone out there, whether you're chasing a big goal or facing a challenge, or here just to listen over a lunch break. And I know my team are here, maybe having some popcorn in a meeting room somewhere. But look, if I was to summarize my leadership journey in 3 words, I think it would be curious, would be my first word, and courageous. And also just learning. I've learned heaps and I'm still learning.
Those are 3 very powerful words, Sarah. Thank you for sharing them. And I think that when I met you, so I think we've known each other for a little bit over or just under a year now. And I think when I met you the first time, those were 3 things that actually resonated with me, because I find in my own leadership journey that those words also are things that I lean into, that curiosity and the love of learning. Sarah, the other thing that grabbed me when we first met a little while ago was just the significance of your project management experience and project leadership. Let's frame it around project leadership. And before meeting you, I had not heard much about the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority. Can you give us a little bit of background on yourself and the authority? And I think you've got some slides. If you want to share your screen, go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. Happy to. But yeah, look, before I also begin, I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm on Darrell land in New South Wales, and really, given it's International Women's Day, I'd like to pay tribute to the tireless work of First Nations women across Australia. So look, a little bit about my journey. As Louise has shared, my career has spanned all sectors. I started out in corporate, working for a life insurance company as a business analyst, and then I moved to the not-for-profit sector, and then local government, and now state government. And although my work has been varied and across different sectors, most of the time my roles have involved project, portfolio, or program management, and nearly all of my roles have focused on adding value to the community, whether here in Australia or abroad. And in my current role, I'm the Director of the Enterprise Project Management Office at the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority. It might seem quite new. I'm not sure if you've heard of our organisation in the media. We were established essentially in December 2022, in line with the recommendations from the independent New South Wales flood inquiry, in a response to those floods that we had that severely impacted areas of New South Wales in March 2022. And the roles of our authority are underpinned by legislation and regulation, and we've been modelled off similar bodies such as the Queensland Reconstruction Authority. But the big difference in our functions and powers is that we have a more stronger focus on proactive mitigation and adaptation to reduce the impacts of natural hazards and climate change. So I'll just share a slide with you so you can get a sense. We've got our vision and our purpose statement here. So you can see that, our vision is for communities in New South Wales to be stronger, safer, and more resilient to disasters in a changing world. And we do this at the Reconstruction Authority by supporting community-centred recovery. And right now we have lots of teams of people working on the recovery from Cyclone Alfred up in northern New South Wales. And look, recovery isn't a short-term thing. It often has a long tail, and many of these communities are faced with multiple and compounding disaster events, making recovery more complex and longer. And while, supporting communities in this recovery from disasters, our work and projects also contribute to the other 3 goals listed there. And they are, to ensure that, our communities in New South Wales are better prepared for disasters, that we're reducing and mitigating the risk posed by natural hazards, and both in recovery and our adaptation work, we look to ensure, that our assets and infrastructures in New South Wales are more resilient to disasters in the future. So I'll just share, Keely, I'll just share this next slide with you because although, you know, it's maybe front of mind because we've just recently gone through Cyclone Alfred, but what many people don't know is how many natural disasters are occurring across the state each year. And so there's a statistic there that I've popped in that, you know, there has been over 121 disasters since 2019, costing more than $9 billion. And so you may recall that over 20,000 homes were significantly damaged in New South Wales floods in 2022. And then we're forecast to hit $1 billion per year in recovery expenditure by 2060 if no action is taken. The other issue that we're really working on, and you know, it's a very complex system issue, is that the majority of our disaster funding is spent on response and recovery, and only 3% on reducing risk. So this really needs to shift, you know, and by investing in adaptation, mitigation, and preparedness measures up front, we can really reduce the impact and cost of natural disasters in New South Wales.
Wow, Sarah, that's quite impressive. Thank you for sharing the context for the organization that you work for. The more I see it, the more I am absolutely so impressed that and happy that there is somebody who is looking out for that, because that is a significant amount of work, and those people who receive your support will be absolutely grateful for it, no doubt. We did go through Cyclone Alfred up here, but you know, the impact of that is still being worked through and felt. So I imagine that there's a lot of people who will be seeking some support into the near future. And thank you for referencing, you know, the acknowledgement to country and the lands that you're standing on, which kind of brings me to my next point, because whilst you've shared a little bit about yourself and about your organisation, there's another reason why International Women's Day is so important to you specifically. Can you share a little bit about your experience and why International Women's Day is so important to you personally?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Yeah, look, it's a real opportunity, I think, to reflect on how far we've come. And my team, for instance, we discovered statistic around the cyclones, and cyclones were called only after female names for about 15 years since inception, and that changed in 1975. So it's just a reminder in terms of, you know, how far we've really come. But look, in some sectors, you know, in Australia, gender equality issues may not be as obvious day to day. But globally, you know, the reality is actually really different. And in the sector I used to work in international community development, you know, millions of girls still don't have access to education and basic health care. And UNESCO reported that there's still 120 million girls who are out of school and they don't have the opportunity to go to school. So I'm going to share some pictures because it seems like a world away. I worked in this sector probably a decade or so ago. I've got a mix of pictures from my previous work and my current work and my current team. But look, in my previous role, and I worked alongside of local community organisations who ran programs, micro savings, you know, water and sanitation, health service, literacy programs in communities. And through those programs, I saw firsthand how, you know, empowering women transforms not only their lives, but entire communities. In one of these pictures, I'm awkwardly cutting a ribbon to a bus stop. And that's the only time I've ever cut a ribbon in my career. And it's probably something that I'm super proud of. These women had asked me as I was visiting the program to cut the ribbon to this new bus stop. And basically they had built this bus stop in a very remote community that had you know, limited access to the village. They had a bus that came by to take people to get the essentials and healthcare, that there was nowhere for the sick people to sit and wait for the bus. And they actually built this bus stop based on their savings over 2 years from this micro savings and lending group. And it was incredible honor. I tried to give away the honor. I said, no, you really need to do this yourselves. But it was something that, you know, something that they really, you know, wanted me to do while I was there. So yeah, it was really honoured to be able to do that and just see how much change some really, community focused and human centered, design focused programs had in their lives. And then look closer to home. I've got the EPMO team there. You can see we're an amazing group of women. We have tried to hire hire a male in the team to increase the diversity, but we've ended up with a very strong team of women. And we've worked in, contexts like the State Emergency Operations Centre and, in some pretty challenging environments, especially with the 2022 floods. But look, in terms of International Women's Day and the gap closer to home, there are some industries that still underrepresent women, and we can see that on boards, and we can also see that there is the gender pay gap still in some organisations. And I think, I'm concerned having a young, teenager, some of the challenges that are emerging for young girls, especially on the impacts of social media. I think it's really important why we stay engaged and support each other, working alongside both men and women colleagues who can be strong advocates for change.
You're absolutely right. There does need to be strong advocacy for change, and it is up to all genders to support that agenda, and we do welcome it. But I love the fact that your history, that you're bringing in some of that philanthropic stuff that you have done in your past, and then bringing that through to your own leadership journey. Can you just tell us a little bit about how everything that you've seen and then those things that you're doing outside of that has shaped your leadership style?
Yeah, I think I've often thrown myself into things and solving problems and gravitated towards areas where I can make a significant impact. And I think, looking back in terms of what's really shaped my leadership style would probably be the most challenging, unfortunately. The biggest challenges that I've faced have really shaped me and really tested me. And, some of them, were, was dealing with, significant corruption in an international program. That was a big one where I ended up being on a bit of a hit list for that kind of state in South Asia. And that was really challenging how I dealt with that, how I worked to advocate good decision making with those around me, but also then on, closer to home where my life wasn't at risk, but, leading transformation across, 300 projects with over 200 stakeholders involved in the project management system where people were at odds with each other and conflicting views. And, that was really challenging to look at, how do I balance different perspectives and how do I facilitate a conversation where I can align people around having a shared outcome. And I think, when navigating high pressure environments and shifting priorities, that's probably where my leadership style has been influenced in terms of, just really identifying, being courageous, I guess, to step in, be optimistic, have some hope, that things might change with a bit of awareness, and also taking the time to listen to really understand issues from all angles before driving home solutions. And one of the biggest things I probably have learned probably in the last 10 years more so is and that's being a bit more measured the older you get, but is just appreciating that even though I can see a solution and others might be able to see a solution, sometimes timing is everything, and just to be really patient with that and understand the political environment that you're working in, and not take that so personally, even though that a change might be a really positive change.
That is a lot. I'm still back at hit list. And everything that you said after that point, whilst amazing, just makes me absolutely fangirl you even more. How does one go from turning, being on a hit list and everything that could possibly, and that is some serious, scary stuff. How do you go from that and reframe that into a positive career direction and just, conquer that? That is just absolutely incredible. Your fortitude and strength, Sarah, is just amazing. Can you, like, in my next few questions, because I'm still in hit list mode, and I can see some of our team members who are on the call are as well, and I really want to just ask you if you're going to be the next female reacher, because I definitely think that there is a character out there that I've got in my mind that has your face that is now doing some amazing stuff. But I'll let the movie play out in my own mind and not share it with the people on this call. But that is some really heavy content. Do you have any specific techniques for addressing that constructively that you do in your own mind when you're dealing with that level of challenge? Like, take me through how you proactively work through that so you're not just completely swamped and overwhelmed by those feelings.
Yeah, look, it was, understanding your own stress response, understanding how you're going to, I brought in others to support with that program in particular. So he had a background in the army, so I felt quite comfortable traveling to those programs with that person. But look, it was, I think just understanding, the limits as well. So we did put some, risk measures in place, and so I was not exposed. And then, I think, I've had kind of not similar challenges, but other some hairy challenges is just appreciating the mental health impacts it can have, and also just recognizing, to seek out for support along the way, and know your limits, and just really communicate clearly when things are going wrong in a program. But hopefully not everyone's programs are like that. And that was only a one-off experience, but it is really, different sectors have different challenges, and the international community sector was really, really challenging. And my hat goes off to anyone working in that sector, given the challenges that they're facing, but they're doing really meaningful work.
Absolutely. And look, you hit on a really valuable point there, which is, things do go wrong. And when they do go wrong, it's actually how we deal with them proactively and in a controlled manner that actually helps us. And there's different tools and techniques we can talk through in project management landscapes and in leadership landscapes to kind of help to frame that. So I love that. And equally so, I think that the Pledge Consulting team also have some sessions coming up, which is the From Chaos to Control, the Mastering the Project Turnaround, which I think would be really valuable to anybody who's kind of wanting to lean into how to, resurrect projects and programs from the brink of destruction into, like, what they could be a successful implementation. So if you're on today's call and you want some more information about that, chat with Louise, because that is absolutely coming up in their program of work. But Sarah, just so much incredible things coming from you today. I've actually got goosebumps because I did not expect that volume of information still on the hit list. But that's all right, because that's a lot. But you're absolutely right when you're reframing how to turn disaster into success, and the things that we learn from those often do make us better people. I like to say to people, I'm a better sister, better mother, better aunt, from all of my experiences. I do also like to say I'm a better horsewoman, but that's a whole other story on me. But these are the things that we kind of bringing the full person to work. So in that same vein, can you kind of take me through what challenges you're seeing in the workforce at the moment from an inclusivity or support for females in leadership? You kind of talked to some of the statistics that we've got at the moment nationally about talking about the differential that we've got with, females' presences on in the CEO realm and on boards. But what are you seeing in your space? And specifically, what is the Reconstruction Authority kind of doing to empower women in this space?
Yeah, thanks, Keely. Yeah, I'd love to follow up with that horsewoman analogy with you later. Love horses, but I
Absolutely.
haven't ridden for years. But look, fortunately, I've been really fortunate. I've worked with organisations where women are well represented. The New South Wales Reconstruction Authority, 70% of our workforce are women, and women are in leadership as well. And I've mentioned my current team is an amazing bunch of women, and and I also had a similar experience at the City of Sydney. They had a gender pay gap actually in favour of women, and the not-for-profit sector as well has some really good, positive, strong, female role models. However, speaking, with female colleagues in the project management profession and other industries, I know it's not always the case. And, I think, when it comes to addressing some of those inequalities, I think a good starting point is to really understand what's in your sphere of control. And if you are in leadership, I guess being aware of any gender pay gaps in your organization and your team, like do you have scope to address some of those within your team? And personally, if you're, facing a gender pay gap, look, I think, it's always good to talk to someone and have a mentor to help you through those salary negotiations, as I know that can be challenging for some women, but it can be absolutely invaluable to have those conversations. And I have heard, some colleagues having noticing disproportionate opportunities going to men in their organisations. And I guess, I'd encourage people to use their networks, both male and female, to know that you're looking and be really clear on the value you offer. And being proactive, I guess, is really key in those environments. You might also have to push harder for that recognition. And if, I guess my advice and encouragement would be if despite your efforts and the culture remains unbalanced, sometimes the best option is to move on. And, I think what we'll be seeing is that organisations that don't foster that fair and equitable workplace really risk losing some highly skilled women. And that's really a loss for everyone.
Absolutely. Sarah, I feel very fortunate. Unity Water has done a significant amount of work on our own, demographics around females in the workforce. And, we've recently, well, not so recently, but Anna Jackson, our CEO, it's amazing to be working with such an inspirational female CEO as a female leader, because you've got something that you can emulate. But equally so, I think that there's also room you know, in a context for women to seek out female leadership circles, or build those circles with your friends, that kind of circular conversation. I know it's trending at the moment, but I've had a female circle for quite some time, a group of individuals. We are all four leads of a private practice, and we regularly seek each other's counsel, and just share the day-to-days, because not only are we professional women, but we're also wives and mothers, and we've got children at different stages, teenagers. As you mentioned yourself, you've got a teenage daughter, and that is a whole other something. And if anybody wants to follow me for any trending analysis, I really feel like we can solve the world's problems by sending a hit team of teenage girls to our some of our problems, because they do master psychological warfare like no one else on this planet. I honestly think that they would have Vladimir Putin shaking in his boots, sitting in the corner, rocking back and forward, because they are just diabolical. But equally so, just, amazing. And the resilience that I see from them, I do see a lot of people talking about the lack of resilience in teenagers, in Gen Alpha, but I see a lot of resilience in my daughter at the moment, just with the way that she presents herself to the world. So I can only hope that she gets that from me, but I really think she gets it from her grandmother, who was an absolute powerhouse. So just while we're talking about skills and resilience and mindset, Sarah, is there anything that you think in your career that people on today's call might, if they're finding themselves in a situation, God forbid not hit list, but something similar, that they can lean into or research? What would you say some of those mindsets are that have been critical for your success?
Yeah, I think I come back to that being curious and really taking a step back and understanding the culture and the environment that you're working in. Look, I think some workplaces are making some really positive changes with the diversity lens, to really focus on how do we increase collaboration, innovation, and these activities have broader benefits for everyone, not just women. But really looking at do we have diverse leadership styles? Are we addressing unconscious bias in our day-to-day work? And are we fostering inclusive decision making? And that can actually create an environment where women can lead authentically. And look, there's many tools and practical tools how to do this, and especially if you're in the program space and you're overseeing forums or decision-making forums, I'd start with that first. Like, how did you come up with the terms of reference? Did you do it in a inclusive way, or did you grab something off the shelf and go, right, we're just following this? So yeah, are there opportunities for people to have a voice in the work that you're doing? And then even at the team level, do you have a team charter where the team can reflect on an annual basis your norms, your values? And are you open to hear, different ideas or different perspectives? So I think, these are small intentional actions that can really help shape essentially, your teams, but also if you've got that broader influence across the organization, and possibly at the executive level as well, how you set up those forums for decision making. So look, I think that's really important. I think, in a in a workforce as well, really encouraging flexibility is still critical for women, and I think we've all benefited that from COVID. And then also that accountability piece, like accountability really matters. So real change comes from setting clear targets and tracking progress. So that's something I'd be mindful of if I was working in an organisation that had a tendency to favour men. I'd be looking at, are they actually measuring and putting some things in place to actually shift the dial. So yeah, there's just some things I'd be thinking at, and the mindset, thinking that through is just really understanding, being open, understanding the environment, because sometimes it's the culture that drives some of these things, not necessarily the individuals. And then how do you make those shifts? Like, what's within your sphere to influence those changes, and getting male and women leaders around it, and maybe just bringing it to their attention as well, to build that awareness within an organization.
Amazing, thank you. Would you describe your mindset as a growth mindset? I know at the beginning of today's call, your three words were curiosity, courage, and learning. Would you describe your mindset as a growth mindset? How do you continue that growth mindset?
Yeah, I think growth and awareness, being aware of the whole system, is really important. And I think it's how do I encourage it? I think that's just something that I've naturally kind of steered towards, because I find if I'm in a singular mindset or think I've got the experience to solve something, I often run into walls, because many of the problems, and that much of the change that we're dealing with is so fast paced and complex. You can't actually resolve things effectively taking those mindsets. So I guess, maybe I've run into a few walls enough that it makes me step back and go, okay, there's something else going on here, that I need to be mindful of. So yeah, I think growth and being aware, that whole of the whole system kind of view.
I love how you described it as a system, because often, using your human-centered design kind of language, often, we think about systems being, technical systems, but it is the end-to-end system about who we are and what we do. And that's probably where you're leaning into your human-centered design kind of theory just around your own life, which is fantastic. I can say right now that you are pretty much the walking definition of a growth mindset in action. So if anybody is kind of trying to figure out what growth mindset actually looks like, you've used some really great words there, which is, it's embracing of the challenges, it's seeing the effort, it's like, being curious about the landscape, and, thinking, okay, well, if that's not working, what will work? And then just reframing that conversation back to people, and just, encouraging others to have that same kind of curiosity about how we can get through this with a little bit more innovation. It doesn't always have to be rinse and repeat. So I do love that. Project management can be a little bit rinse and repeat, but there's always room for, doing things a little bit differently or a little bit better. And as Ian, when we were doing our project management development at Unity Water, we have a tailorable and a scaling process to our project management framework, and I almost called it scalering and tailoring and scalering because I always get those words mixed up in my mind. But it's really important to approach challenges in front of you with that tailorable and the scalable kind of context, because it helps you to address what's in front of you. So I love that. Thank you very much for that. We were talking about before, and when you introduced yourself as, who you are, you kind of indicated that, you're a professional leader, you're a project leader in your own right. And you've said that you've got a daughter at home, and, those are three different kind of, accesses that we traverse on a regular basis being women. And I'm not saying that men don't have that same kind of commitment challenge of, who's got their right shoes, does everybody have their gym bag, do you have your lunch, all of those conversations. And that's only when I'm in the shower that I'm having these thoughts, I'm thinking 3 steps ahead. In what I would call a high pressured role, the demands of leadership, personal commitments, and what you've said before about well-being, how do you find balance for those things? And is there any kind of practical frameworks or habits that you use that you can kind of, share with us today to kind of just make sure that you are maintaining balance? And, I'm trying not to say that balance is something that we can do every day, but I think it kind of works in bow ties. So, talk to us about how you find balance.
Yeah, thanks, Keely. That's the $1,000,000 question, right, for working women, and men who've got families. Look, it is really elusive. It really shifts week to week, really depending on work, life, and family demands. One thing that I've really learnt, through the both highs and lows of my career, juggling young kids, especially if you've got young kids, it's super challenging. But there's no perfect formula, and it can be incredibly tough. So. I guess one habit, that has helped me recently that I've brought in last year, we usually use retrospectives as a team, but I've got in my diary blocked aside 15-minute a weekly check-in with myself, and I track how I'm going against professional and personal goals, and it helps me just keep focused, and it helps me readjust before, things come overwhelming, or really focus on those things that matter. And yeah, just doing things that help calm the nervous system when there's a lot going on, like meditation. If I'm going like into the city, I plug in my Insights app and listen and just do some breathing, which really helps. And also the kids are a bit older now, so I've been able to prioritize exercise more, but it's harder now that I'm older. I have to work really hard. Yeah, and look, I've been involved on boards and juggling volunteer commitments as well as doing my MBA when I had the kids really young. But yeah, it's also really important to know your limits. And this year I've started to pull back on some of my volunteer commitments, just to find that space. So, and I think that's something, really knowing what your limits are, and it's okay to pull back if your foundations are starting to crack. And then when you've got more capacity and time, then absolutely, you can readjust, and being, quite kind and caring for yourself. And I'm saying that out loud, but it is hard sometimes to pull back on volunteering stuff where that you've got the skill set and you can do it with your eyes closed. But it you really have to. It's a long game, especially if you're working full time and you've got a family as well that you're juggling. Another tool that I found really helpful. There's a book called Designing Your Life, and it's got practical exercises and templates that help evaluate where you're at. And, it's a really great reflection tool, and they've got some annual tools in that as well. So, yeah, that has been really helpful too.
I think that that's fantastic. And so the author of Designing Your Life, is that Bill Burnett and David Evans?
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. I will have a look at that. I'm not a huge lover of the self-help books, but I do love a good, podcast or, as you mentioned, the Mindset app. There's, several of the apps that are kind of available at the moment where you can do incremental learning through 5-minute journeys with different kind of if you're struggling with a growth mindset, you can plug that in and they'll give you like all different books and they'll tell you the summary of the different books and the theories behind them. So I do love a good one of those when I'm driving into the office if I'm, kind of trying to learn something different. But I will have a look at Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. So thank you very much for sharing that. I think that there's a bit of not a farce, but when I think about balance in my mind, if I visualize that, because I'm a partially visual and a logical person, I see a little scale with a little ball on the middle of it, and and where the ball is. And I think that a lot of women coming up, younger women who children are really young, I had a team member once say to me, how do you do it? You always look like you're succeeding, so well in the leadership space. And I just have to say to her, similar to what you just said before, which is a very realistic view. I live my life in bow ties. So, if I'm succeeding professionally, it means I'm usually sacrificing something personally, be that it be, exercise or, time with my kids and that kind of stuff. So I think about balance now no longer as that linear scale of, what's balance, but more just making sure that if I give more in this space, that I get that back in another space. And we did a women's leadership course here at Unity Water, and they talked about the wheel of life. And that's one of the things that I probably will take away with me for forever. So similar to what you were saying about the Designing Your Life, on the wheel of life, you kind of plot out and you check in with yourself on where you're kind of feeling your tire might be a bit flat. And if your tire's a bit flat, you know that you can't roll down the road with a flat tire. So I found that analogy particularly helpful. Which is one of the things that I love in my resource kit to kind of share with people. But there is that, kind of, I feel like it's women can have it all kind of theory, which is, you can have it all, but not all at the same time. And it is about designing your life and what you want to achieve. So thanks so much for sharing that. That's a really valuable resource for me to take away from this. And I hope the others find that too. And we do have an active chat, so if anybody's got any questions for Sarah, please either pop them in the chat, or we will have some time for questions because we are actually getting towards the end of the interview. So Sarah, is there anything else before we do wrap up for the day and before we lean into these questions? Is there anything else that you kind of want to share with the team? If there was one thing that's truly shaped your success, what would that be?
Wow, that's a deep question. I think it's yeah, I guess my drive. Like I'm a passionate person and I'm motivated. Working in organizations that are, delivering positive outcomes and impact. And so that's what's really driven me, I think, in my roles, and wanting to make a difference, even if I haven't been directly working on the ground, but wanting to make a difference in, the way that teams are structured, that teams collaborate, and that difference in terms of working with colleagues and being really open and collegiate in my approach. And I think that can make a difference, and I hope it does make a difference. And I may not always get it right, and being open to learn is really important. But I think, if you can think about through what kind of drives you and